From the brutal execution of Ned Stark, to Joffrey getting the karma for his actions, today we'll be talking about all the major deaths in the Game of Thrones universe, from those that are absolutely deserved to the ones that were so brutal and undeserving that they just left us in shock for days, starting with our first deserving death from Game of Thrones. Cersei Lannister. Cersei was the eldest child of Tywin Lannister and the wife of Robert Baratheon, who believed that staying in power was the ultimate goal, and she spent her entire life proving that she was willing to do anything to keep it.
When you play the Game of Thrones, you win, or you die. There is no middle ground.
The first time we get a glimpse of this greed is during the Tournament of the Hand. King Robert was hunting and drinking during the celebration in Kingswood. As he was tracking down a boar, he was heavily drunk and unable to defend himself. Just as he was about to catch said boar, it attacked him, resulting in an injury.
My fault. Too much wine. Missed my thrust.
But in reality, all of it was a deliberate plot to get Robert killed. Lancel Lannister was Cersei's cousin and the king's squire, who was responsible for giving him wine. Cersei, with the help of her cousin, made sure he was given a flask of very strong wine.
Lannister boy.
Such a dutiful boy to make sure his grace did not lack refreshment. I do hope the poor lad does not blame himself.
King Robert was reckless when he was drunk, and Cersei used his recklessness against him. She did this to protect her children's claim to the throne, and to hide her years-long incestuous relationship with Jaime Lannister. When Ned Stark figured out the truth and offered her a chance to flee, she instead chose to strike first.
Is this meant to be your shield, Lord Stark? A piece of paper.
Those were the king's words.
We have a new king now.
She refused Robert's orders to make Ned Stark regent of the Seven Kingdom, and when Ned threatened to have her arrested with the help of the City Watch, she had him double-crossed and arrested. As Ned Stark stood trial for treason, she stood by and watched as he was beheaded, despite knowing that keeping him alive was the only way to prevent a continent-wide war. She even defended Joffrey as he tormented those around him, and ignored his public humiliation of Sansa, his future wife.
Meryn, leave her face. I like her pretty.
But Cersei didn't just ignore Sansa's suffering, she took part in it. She manipulated Sansa by pretending to care, when in reality, she was using her as leverage against the Starks.
The more people you love, the weaker you are. You'll do things for them that you know you shouldn't do. You'll act the fool to make them happy, to keep them safe. Love no one but your children. On that front, a mother has no choice.
After Joffrey's death, Olenna Tyrell planned to have her granddaughter married to Tommen because she understood he would be easier for Margaery to control and manipulate. When they got married, Margaery was easily able to influence Tommen and the people of King's Landing, which threatened Cersei's own influence. So in order to take back her power, she made the High Sparrow the new High Septon and reinstated the Faith Militant, which immediately arrested Loras Tyrell for his homosexuality and Margaery for being an accomplice. However, arming the Faith Militant immediately backfired, as Lancel confessed his crimes and had Cersei arrested.
And he has much to say about you.
She was forced to do the Walk of Shame as a way to repent for her sins, but as soon as the walk ended, she ordered Sir Gregor Clegane to murder anyone who was speaking wrongfully about her. Even after her walk, instead of accepting responsibility and facing her trial, she committed the single largest act of civilian mass murder in the series by destroying the Great Sept of Baelor with wildfire.
There's something wrong.
You have nothing to fear, Your Grace. The trial will begin shortly.
Cersei is not here. Tommen is not here. Why do you think they are not here?
That act directly led to Tommen's suicide. She barely took a moment to mourn before claiming the crown for herself.
He should be with his grandfather, his brother, his sister. Burn him, bury his ashes where the Sept once stood.
After blowing up the Sept of Baelor, she had Septa Unella captured and confessed her sins, including her incestuous relationship with her brother, the murder of her husband, and the explosion of the Great Sept to her. Later, she gave her as a prisoner to the mountain, so she could be tortured.
Your gods have forsaken you. This is your god now.
Then she showed the same sadistic streak when she took revenge on Ellaria Sand. After Ellaria killed Cersei's daughter, Myrcella, Cersei had Ellaria and her daughter, Tyenn, captured by Euron. In a mirrored execution, Cersei poisoned Tywin with the same toxin used on Myrcella and chained Ellaria to the wall, forcing her to watch as she dies.
Your daughter will die here in this cell. And you will be here watching when she does.
Cersei spent her final days ruling through fear and lies, even deceiving Jon and Daenerys about helping fight the Night King so that she could hold on to her power.
And I intend to stay amongst the living. Let the Stark boy and his new queen defend the North. We stay here where we've always been.
However, her spite and arrogance led her to make an irredeemable mistake. She captured Missandei, who was the advisor and close friend of Daenerys. Cersei had her beheaded in front of Daenerys simply because she wanted to send her.
If you have any last words, now is the time.
This act of pure spite was the match that lit the fire and drove Daenerys into the blind rage that led to the destruction of King's Landing. As Daenerys continued to destroy King's Landing, Cersei and Jaime tried to escape through the cellars of the Red Keep. Jaime, when they reached the exit, it was blocked by debris. As the realization that there was no escape hit Cersei, she started to panic, cry, and beg Jaime to save them. Jaime realized that they were both doomed and hugged her until they were crushed by debris. It was a poetic end for someone who spent her life crushing others, only to be crushed by the very palace she refused to leave. But while Cersei's cruelty was often hidden behind palace walls, Meryn Trant used his position to be a bully in broad daylight. Meryn Trant. Meryn Trant was a knight of the Kingsguard under Joffrey Baratheon, who spent his life hiding behind the White Cloak to excuse his cruelty. He was just a bully who used royal authority as protection.
So Meryn helps Sir Donto celebrate my name day. See that he drinks his fill.
From the start, he showed he had no honor when he killed Syrio Forel, Arya's teacher, who faced him with nothing but a wooden sword.
What do we say to the god of death?
Not today.
While other members of the Kingsguard sometimes hesitated when given cruel orders, Trant never did, and was always the first to act, and often with glee.
My mother tells me a king should never strike his lady, Sir Meryn.
During Joffrey's reign, he became the main tool used to abuse Sansa Stark. He followed orders to beat her in public, and he did it without hesitation, showing how much he enjoyed the power. Trant represented the worst kind of violence. The violence of a man who only felt strong when backed by status and a sword, especially against someone who couldn't fight back. However, his true nature was finally exposed when he traveled to Braavos, where he used his wealth and authority to exploit young girls, which further proved that he deeply enjoyed torturing those who were powerless.
You'll have a fresh one for me tomorrow.
The next day, when he returned, he was given 3 young girls. He beat the first 2, but only became interested in the third girl because she refused to give him the satisfaction of a scream. Trant sent the others out and began to viciously punch and kick the third girl. But what Trant didn't realize was that his prey was actually Arya Stark, who wore a face mask she had stolen from the House of Black and White. After enduring his blows, she struck back and lunged at Trant, stabbing him repeatedly in both eyes, which blinded him. As Trant stumbled across the room, Arya muffled his screams with a cloth, ensuring no one would come to his aid.
Do you know who you are? You're no one.
She reminded him of Syrio Forel before slowly slitting his throat. His death was the ultimate narrative payoff, when Arya Stark brutally maimed and then murdered him, making him suffer and feel helpless. It was truly one of the most satisfying ends to a horrible person. Pure Schadenfreude. But while Meryn Trant hid behind a knight's armor, the High Sparrow hid his thirst for power behind the robes of a humble priest. The High Sparrow. The High Sparrow was the leader of the religious group known as the Sparrows. On the surface, he appeared to be a kind, selfless man, trying to help the people of King's Landing after the War of the Five Kings.
We're often stuck with the names our enemies give to us. The notion that we're all equal in the eyes of the Seven doesn't sit well with some, so they belittle me.
But beneath that image, he was a skilled manipulator who used religion to gain power. When he arrived in King's Landing, he presented himself as a savior, slowly earning the trust of the common people by preaching equality and justice. That image cracked when he ordered the High Septon to perform a walk of shame for visiting a brothel.
You have profaned our faith, the faith of our fathers and forefathers.
I am the High Septon of the...
You are a sinner. You shall be punished.
This public display of power caught Cersei's attention, and she saw him as a tool she could use to strengthen her own position.
Faith and the crown are the two pillars that hold up this world. One collapses, so does the other. We must do everything necessary to protect one another.
With Cersei's support, the Sparrows were armed and reborn as the Faith Militant. Once the High Sparrow had the backing of the crown, he began using violence openly, beating, imprisoning, and humiliating anyone he judged to be sinful. However, he soon turned his attention to the people in power, which started with them imprisoning and arresting Loras Tyrell on charges of homosexuality, and later imprisoning Margaery Tyrell for hiding her brother's so-called sins.
The Faith is satisfied there is enough evidence to bring a formal trial for Ser Loras and Queen Margaery.
While this was secretly a part of Cersei's scheme to de-influence the Tyrells, the power she gave the Sparrows backfired spectacularly when Lancel confessed to sleeping with Cersei, leading to her arrest and walk of shame.
But piece by piece, he unburdened himself. Let go of vanity, pride, sin. Now his soul is so light, he will float through the seven heavens like a bird.
The darkest part of his rule was how he forced confessions. He deprived prisoners of basic needs, broke them down with constant scripture, and had them beaten when they refused to comply. His cruelty was always disguised as holy punishment.
Death of reason.
I wish you'd said it sooner.
However, his end came when everyone had gathered at the Great Sept of Baelor for Cersei's trial. As they stood there waiting for her, the Sept exploded, killing him and everyone inside it. It was a fitting act of karma for a man who used faith as a weapon and hid brutality behind righteousness. Janos Slynt only cared about who was paying him the most gold. Janos Slynt was the commander of the City Watch of King's Landing, and a man who possessed a small amount of power. But he used every ounce of that power to be a bully, a coward, and always a traitor. He treated the law like a business, and sold his loyalty to the highest bidder, while hiding behind the safety of his uniform. We see this early on when Ned Stark asks Littlefinger to pay off the gold cloaks, making it clear that their loyalty could be bought.
When the Queen proclaims one king and the Hand proclaims another, whose peace do the gold cloaks protect? Who do they follow? The man who pays them.
Soon after, Janos personally assured Ned that the City Watch would support it.
All is accomplished, the City Watch is yours.
But Janos had already been bought by the Lannisters. The moment Ned made his move in the throne room, Janos signaled his men to turn their blades on the Stark guards, overseeing a massacre of the very people he had sworn to protect. No! His cruelty reached its peak in Season 2, when he carried out Joffrey's order to eliminate Robert Baratheon's bastards. Janos didn't just supervise the killings. He ripped an infant girl away from her mother in a brothel and murdered the child without a hint of hesitation. When Tyrion became Hand of the King, he finally exposed Janos for what he was. Tyrion stripped him of his power and exiled him to the Wall, replacing him with Bronn as commander of the City Watch.
I intend to serve as Hand of the King until my father returns from the war. And seeing as you betrayed the last Hand of the King, well, I just wouldn't feel safe with you lurking about.
King himself made me a lord!
At the Wall, without political protection or authority, Janos aligned himself with Sir Alliser Thorne and openly opposed Jon Snow, often working against him.
Let the mutineers take care of Snow, or you might be taking orders from him the rest of your life.
During the Battle of Castle Black, when he was given command of the Wall after Alliser Thorne was wounded, his bravery completely vanished, and when faced with the reality of an actual fight against wildlings and giants, Janos panicked, abandoned his post, and hid in the kitchen like a frightened child. However, his downfall came when Jon, now Lord Commander, ordered him to take charge of the ruined Castle Greyguard. Janos saw this as an insult and openly refused. Jon didn't take this lightly and ordered his execution. In his final moments, Janos gave up his dignity and begged for mercy.
I'm afraid. I've always been afraid.
But while Janos died a coward begging for his life, Stannis Baratheon was about to lose everything in his pursuit of power. Stannis Baratheon. Stannis Baratheon was Robert Baratheon's brother and a military commander who was feared across the Seven Kingdoms for his lack of mercy. After Robert's death and the revelation that Cersei's children were illegitimate, Ned Stark named Stannis the true heir to the Iron Throne.
Commander, and he is utterly without mercy.
Stannis Baratheon is Robert's true heir. The throne is his by right.
But Stannis didn't want to just lead the realm, he wanted to own it. He was obsessed with his destiny as the rightful heir, which made him easy prey for religious extremism. The moment he allowed the Red Priestess Melisandre into his court, he began to trade his morality for the promise of a crown.
But the night is dark and full of terror.
From there, he began justifying every decision as divine will, and his path began when he allowed Melisandre to use blood magic to assassinate his own brother, Renly.
Together, we could end this war in a fortnight.
His complete disregard for human cost eventually led to his downfall in the north. As he marched to retake Winterfell from the Boltons, his army was trapped in a brutal winter storm that they were unprepared for. Stannis still chose to push forward, no matter the consequences.
This is the right time, and I will risk everything, because if I don't, we've lost. We march to victory, or we march to defeat, but we go forward. Only forward.
Desperation, combined with Melisandre's influence, pushed him to commit one of the most horrifying acts in the series. He first sent Sir Davos away, the only man who might have stopped him, and then manipulated his daughter Shireen into helping him.
Sometimes a person has to choose. If a man knows what he is and remains true to himself and become who he is meant to be, however much he may hate it.
Shireen promised to help her father in any way she could, not understanding what he was about to do.
Is there any way I can help?
Yes, there is.
Good, I want to. I'm the Princess Shireen of House Baratheon, and I'm your daughter.
Forgive me.
As the guards led Shireen to the pyre, Stannis stood by and watched. Even as she screamed for him to save her, he didn't move, and instead chose to trade his own blood, his daughter, for a chance at power.
Father! Father, don't do this, please!
But the magic failed, and his wife ended up taking her own life in grief. After that, half his army deserted him, and Melisandre abandoned him. As Stannis was broken and defeated, he marched his men into a slaughter against the Boltons, and ended up wounded and alone, leaning against a tree, where Brienne of Tarth finally found him.
Brienne of Tarth sentence you to die. Do you have any last words?
Stannis told her to do her duty, and she executed him as retribution for the murder of his brother. Stannis traded his soul for a crown he never got to wear, and that same obsession with destiny is exactly what led to the downfall of Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys Targaryen was the last surviving heir of a dying Targaryen dynasty. She was known as the Mother of Dragons, the Unburnt, and the Breaker of Chains. She began as a victim of her circumstances and rose to power through sheer will and strength. But like many Targaryens before her, she lost herself in the pursuit of power. She was introduced as a frightened young girl, abused by her brother Viserys, and sold into marriage to Khal Drogo. From early on, she framed her suffering as destiny and came to believe the Iron Throne was hers by right, simply because she was a Targaryen.
He was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon.
But after Drogo was left in a mindless state by a witch's curse, Daenerys was forced to take her first life as an act of mercy, using a pillow to end her husband's suffering.
When the sun rises in the west and sets in the east, then you shall return to me, my sun and stars.
But that mercy didn't last long. That same night, she tied the witch Mirri Maz Duur to Drogo's funeral pyre.
I will. But it's not your screams I want. Only your life.
As she watched the woman burn, Daenerys walked into the flames herself and emerged with 3 dragons, believing she was now the only true dragon. She then traveled to the city of Qarth, where she eventually locked the traitors who tried to steal her dragons in a dark vault to die slowly. It was the first sign of her tyranny that we would see later on. But even her good deeds were soaked in blood. After the city of Qarth, Daenerys went to Slaver's Bay, where she gained her reputation as a liberator and freed slaves. In Astapor, she tricked the Master Krasnus into thinking he had bored her dragon, only to order Drogon to burn him. She then told her new army to slaughter every man holding a whip.
Go by Gavi! Axe
Raitsia osentas, menti osentas. Kiloni pilos lue vale tolvio osenetas. Inini odrigatas. Orne lue dolide prisotas.
When she reached Meereen, her justice became even more brutal. After finding 163 slave children crucified on the road, she decided to answer cruelty with more cruelty. She rounded up 163 masters and nailed them to crosses, refusing to hear their pleas for mercy. This was the first major sign that her moral compass was breaking, and that she no longer cared if some of those men were innocent.
I will answer injustice with justice.
When her advisor, Mossador, caused the very people she freed to turn on her, she executed him without any second thoughts. Later, when she was captured by the Dothraki, she burned 13 Karls alive in their own temple, watching them scream as she stood untouched by the flames. By the time she reached the shores of Westeros, she had become someone who demanded absolute obedience. When she defeated the Lannister army, she gave the survivors a simple choice: bend the knee or die. When Randall and Dickon Tarly refused, she burned them alive where they stood, even when Tyrion begged her to show mercy.
I gave them a choice. They made it.
But it was the loss of her inner circle that finally pushed her over the edge. She watched her dragon Viserion get struck down by the Night King, and then lost her oldest friend, Ser Jorah, during the Battle of Winterfell. When she reached King's Landing, she suffered the ultimate blow. Her best friend, Missandei, was beheaded right in front of her.
If you have any last words, now is the time.
Missandei's execution changed everything. After losing her closest friend, Daenerys stopped listening to her advisors and prepared for a final, violent attack on King's Landing. The battle for the city was over almost as soon as it began. Her dragon destroyed the gates, the Lannister army dropped their weapons, and the city bells rang out to signal a total surrender. The war was won, but as Daenerys sat on her dragon looking at the city, she didn't stop. She flew over the walls and began burning the crowded streets, block by block. She turned the city into a graveyard, killing thousands of innocent people who had nowhere to run. By the time everyone was dead, the Breaker of Chains had become the greatest mass murderer in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. Her end came in the ruins of the throne room. As she finally stood before the Iron Throne, she showed no remorse for the lives she had taken. When Jon Snow confronted her and asked about the family she had burned, she claimed it was necessary to build a new world. She believed she was the only person who knew what was right, which meant she was ready to kill anyone who stood in her way.
Not easy to see something that's never been before.
Jon realized that as long as Daenerys was alive, the war would never end. As Jon held her for the last time, he drove a dagger into her heart, killing the woman he loved in order to prevent the tyrannical future she envisaged. But while Daenerys was a queen who lost her way, Olly let his need for revenge turn him into a traitor. Olly was a young boy from the Gift who fled to the Night's Watch after his village was attacked by the Free Folk. After the wildlings climbed over the wall, they began raiding villages near the wall, and one of these villages was Olly's. His father was shot and killed by an arrow, while his mother was stabbed and murdered. The only reason Olly survived was that the wildlings needed to send a message to the Night's Watch.
I'm going to eat your dead mama, and I'm going to eat your dead papa. Go tell the crows at Castle Black.
When he arrived at Castle Black, he was taken in by Jon Snow. He formed a genuine bond with Jon, and he made Olly his personal steward. During the Battle of Castle Black, Olly proved his worth by fighting alongside the men who had become his new family.
Find a weapon, Olly! Fight them!
Even though Olly killed Ygritte during this battle, Jon held no resentment towards him and continued to care for him as he always had. However, the bond between them began to shatter when Jon made the difficult choice to save the wildlings from the White Walkers. To Jon, it was a matter of survival for the living, but to Olly, it was a betrayal of his parents' memory, and he refused to see the bigger picture, choosing to nurture his hatred rather than trust Jon.
We were farmers. They slaughtered us. So why is he saving him?
That anger made him an easy target for Alliser Thorne, who encouraged Olly's resentment and slowly pulled him towards betrayal. But while he was influenced by authority figures, his choice to take part was his own. When the Night's Watch turned on Jon Snow, Olly was at the center of it. He lured Jon into the courtyard by claiming that his uncle Benjen had been found alive, only for Jon to be betrayed.
Lord Commander,
It's one of the wildlings you brought back. Says he knows your Uncle Benjen. Says he's still alive.
The moment became even more brutal when the final stab came from Ollie himself.
For the watch.
When Jon was resurrected, he held everyone involved in the mutiny accountable. As they stood on the gallows, the other men offered excuses or final words of defiance, but Ollie remained silent. Even with a noose around his neck, Ollie offered no apology or remorse. He stared at Jon with nothing but cold, stubborn hatred. Jon carried out the sentence, and even at the end, Ollie showed no real remorse, proving that his need for revenge mattered more to him than Jon's kindness or everything else that he had taught him. Ollie was consumed by his hatred for the wildlings, much like how Mirri Maz Duur let her hatred for the Dothraki destroy her humanity. Mirri Maz Duur. Mirri Maz Duur was the first person to show Daenerys Targaryen that you can't buy loyalty with kindness. Mirri was a god's wife of the Lazarene, who dedicated her life to healing the people of her village until Khal Drogo's Khalasar raided it. The Dothraki stole their animals, tortured women, and burned the Temple of the Great Shepherd, where Mirri had spent her life treating the sick. When Daenerys rode through the aftermath, she saw the Dothraki warriors claiming the surviving women as spoils of war. Daenerys intervened and claimed the woman as her own to protect them from further rape and abuse.
Princess, you have a gentle heart. This is how it's always been.
I do not have a gentle heart, sir.
Daenerys believed she had saved Mirri, but in reality, Mirri wanted revenge, and the opportunity arrived when Khal Drogo suffered a chest wound. Mirri stepped forward and offered her services as a healer. However, the wound later became infected when Mirri intentionally poisoned the wound, and Drogo was on the verge of death.
You will die tonight, Khaleesi.
He can't. He can't. I won't let him.
Even a queen doesn't have that power.
Unfortunately, Daenerys didn't know what Mirri had done, and in a moment of desperation, she asked for Mirri's help to bring back Khal Drogo.
There is a spell. Some would say death is cleaner. There is a price. Only death pays for life.
But the blood magic Mirri performed wasn't an attempt to save Drogo, but rather a calculated act of murder disguised as help.
The witch, she can bring baby.
The ritual left Drogo in a paralyzed state and also killed Daenerys' unborn child. When Daenerys woke to find her child dead and her husband a shell of a man, she demanded to know when he would return to her.
This is not life. When will he be as he was?
When the sun rises in the west, sets in the east. When the seas go dry, when the mountains blow in the wind like leaves.
While Mirri's suffering at the hands of the Dothraki was real, she chose to continue that cycle of violence by taking revenge. Reality check about the moral cost of the Dothraki way of life.
3 of those riders had already raped me before you saved me, girl. I saw my god's house burn. So, tell me again exactly what it was that you saved.
But none of that mattered when Daenerys ordered Mirri to be tied to the funeral pyre of Khal Drogo.
I will, but it's not your screams I want. Only your life.
In the end, Daenerys used the same fire that destroyed her family to make sure the witch could never hurt anyone again. But while Mirri Maz Duur was a victim who turned into a killer, Euron Greyjoy was a man who simply loved the thrill of destruction. Euron Greyjoy. Euron Greyjoy was the uncle of Theon Greyjoy, a well-experienced sailor and a sociopath with a god complex to boot. While other villains in Westeros fought for legacy or survival, Euron fought purely for the thrill of destruction and the gratification of his own massive ego. When he returned to the Iron Islands, he murdered his own brother by pushing him off a bridge during a storm, staging it to look like an accident.
I am the storm, brother. The first storm and the last. And you're in my way.
Later, when Yara Greyjoy tried to convince her father's council to name her the next ruler of the Iron Islands, Euron stepped in and exploited the council's sexism to steal the seat for himself.
I wasn't born to be king. I paid the iron price. And here I stand.
Once he was crowned ruler of the Iron Islands, his next move was simple: murder his niece and nephews so no one could challenge his claim.
Where are my niece and nephew? Let's go murder them.
But when he was unsuccessful in capturing them, he aligned himself with Cersei Lannister.
Since it appears that
All our treasonous family members are fighting for the same side. I thought we rightful monarchs could murder them together.
Euron Greyjoy treated war like a game. And after capturing Yara and Ilaria Sand in a naval ambush, he paraded her through the streets of King's Landing like a leashed animal. He kept them chained, relishing in the psychological torment.
My queen, please accept this gift on behalf of all of your loyal subjects in the Iron Islands.
I give you what no other man could give.
Justice for your murdered daughter. There's only one reward I want.
Euron believed he was invincible, but his arrogance eventually led to his downfall. During the burning of King's Landing, Euron washed up on the shores beneath the Red Keep to find Jaime Lannister. Even as the city crumbled and a dragon rained fire from above, Euron was only concerned with being a legend. He engaged Jaime in a brutal yet pointless duel, driven by the need to be the man who killed the Kingslayer.
If you kill another king before you die, they'll sing about you forever.
Jaime eventually got the upper hand with him and left Euron to bleed out on the sand. In his final moments, Euron didn't show fear or regret for the thousands he had helped murder. He died with a manic grin, boasting that he had won because he managed to wound Jaime.
I'm the man who killed Jaime Lannister.
But things get even darker when you look at Craster and how he lived in the frozen north. Craster. Craster was a wildling who lived north of the Wall in a fortified homestead, surrounded by his so-called daughter wives. He was a deeply unsettling, but useful ally of the Night's Watch, often offering them shelter and information.
What I hear, he's already got more men than any of your southern kings.
And where does he plan marching this army?
When you're all the way north, there's only one direction to go.
He maintained a cycle of incest that was unparalleled in Westeros by marrying his own daughters and forcing them to bear his children. If the child was a girl, she was raised to eventually become one of his wives.
He marries his daughters, and they give him more daughters, and on it goes.
However, what happened to the boys was even worse, because Craster viewed them as a threat to his control and a burden on his resources. He treated his newborn male children as a currency, and would take them into the woods and leave them as sacrifices for the White Walkers. Craster's downfall came when his arrogance finally collided with the desperation of the Night's Watch. After the disastrous battle at the Fist of the First Men, the survivors of the Watch returned to Craster's keep. Despite having plenty of food hidden away, Craster refused to share, openly mocking them.
We'll give you crows enough. I've got to feed my women!
As tensions kept rising among them, Karl Tanner, a former assassin from King's Landing, finally had enough of Craster's mouth and insulted him back.
You are a bastard.
This infuriated Craster, and he lunged at him with an axe. But Karl was fast, and he drove a dagger through the roof of Craster's mouth, instantly killing him. In the end, Craster was a deeply, deeply twisted man, and his death at his keep was sudden and brutal. It was completely earned. Craster was a man who betrayed his own children, but Lysa Arryn was just as bad, betraying her own sister for a man who did not care about her. Lysa Arryn. Lysa Arryn was the sister of Catelyn Stark and the wife of Jon Arryn, the former Hand of the King. When we are first introduced to her, she sends a letter to Catelyn claiming to reveal the truth behind Jon Arryn's death.
She's fled the capital. She says Jon Arryn was murdered by the Lannisters. She says the king is in danger.
That one letter was the spark that started the War of the Five Kings. It turned the Starks against the Lannisters and tore the whole country apart. But as the story went on, we saw that Lysa is deeply unstable. When Catelyn actually went to see her sister for help, she found a woman who had completely lost her mind. Lysa was hiding at the top of a mountain, obsessed with her son, Robin. Even though he was way too old for it, she was still breastfeeding him in front of everyone and refused to let him leave her side.
Family means everything to me. And I will not risk Robin's life to get caught up in another of your husband's wars.
I'm hungry.
Hush now, darling. Just eat.
Lysa even treated the law like a joke. When Catelyn brought Tyrion Lannister to the Eyrie, Lysa didn't care about the truth. She used the trial as entertainment for her son, laughing while Robin talked about wanting to see the little man fly out of the moon door.
You want a trial, my Lord Lannister? Very well. My son will listen to whatever you have to say, and you will hear his judgment. Then you will leave. By one door or the other.
However, her jealousy and paranoia reached their peak when Peter Baelish brought Sansa Stark to the Eyrie following the murder of Joffrey Lannister. She was convinced Sansa was trying to steal him because she saw Peter kissing her in the courtyard. This caused Lysa to lash out and threaten Sansa into confessing the truth.
My father, my husband, my sister, they all stood between us and now they're all dead.
But the truth about Lysa was soon revealed when she confessed in front of Peter.
I lied for you, I killed for you!
She was manipulated by Peter Baelish to poison her own husband and frame his political enemies for the murders. In the end, Lysa's death came from the only person she ever trusted. As she stood in front of the moon door crying, Peter walked up to her to comfort her.
I have only loved one woman. Only one. My entire life. Your sister.
Before she could even react, Baelish pushed her through the same moon door she used to threaten so many others, and died falling from the very heights she thought made her safe. But while Lysa Arryn was a highborn murderer who hid from the world, Karl Tanner took pride in being a cold-blooded killer. Karl Tanner. Karl Tanner was a brother of the Night's Watch, who went north with Jorah Mormont to the Fist of the First Men. At first, he seemed like just another criminal from King's Landing, but what truly set him apart from the rest was his sadistic nature and inability to follow rules. At Craster's Keep, he harassed Craster and tried to take advantage of his daughters.
Keep your eyes where they belong. They're not for you. But you feed that pig better than you feed us.
When the Night's Watch returned from the Fist of the First Men, they were hungry, tired, and looking for a place to stay. However, Craster was not being hospitable, and tensions between them were at an all-time high. It finally snapped during a meal in the Great Hall.
I am a godly man!
You're a stingy bastard!
While the Lord Commander tried to maintain order, Karl decided to light the fuse and insulted Craster's lifestyle and his family.
A daughter-fucking, wildling bastard.
This infuriated Craster, and the confrontation turned into a fight that ended with Karl killing Craster. But when Lord Commander Mormont threatened to hold Karl accountable, he was stabbed by one of Karl's accomplices, and chaos ensued at the keep.
I shall have your head!
Following the chaos, Sam and Gilly escaped from the keep and returned to the Wall, where they informed Jon Snow about the mutiny. But once Karl was in charge of the keep, his true depravity was on full display. He took the skull of Jorah Mormont and turned it into a drinking cup, and bragged about his kills while sipping wine from the head of the man who was his leader.
Karl Tanner from Gin Alley, drinking wine from the skull of Jorah fucking Mormont.
He held Craster's wives and daughters hostage, using them as slaves. When Bran Stark and his companions were captured near the keep, Karl saw them as nothing more than new toys to break. He threatened to assault Meera Reed simply because he enjoyed the power it gave him over others.
You left your daddy's castle looking for trouble, didn't you? No dresses for you.
His arrogance was his undoing when Jon Snow led a party to retake the keep. Karl refused to hide or negotiate. He believed his skills as a street fighter made him superior to a trained highborn soldier like Jon.
We were free men. You'll never be free. You'll never know what that's like.
During their final duel, Karl nearly won by using his speed and spitting in Jon's face. But one of Craster's wives, who had suffered under Karl's rule, stabbed him in the back, giving Jon the opportunity he needed. Jon Snow drove Longclaw through the back of Karl's head. It was a brutal, visceral end for a man who had spent his life hurting the innocent. Joffrey Baratheon. Joffrey was vain, cruel, and entitled from the moment he appeared on screen in Game of Thrones.
And who are you, boy?
Micah, my lord.
Starting with how he lied about Arya and her friend Micah, attacking him in Winterfell. That lie cost the poor butcher boy his life, along with Sansa's direwolf, Lady.
They all attacked me and she threw my sword in the river.
Liar!
Shut up!
But that was just the beginning, as his next crime was beheading Ned Stark publicly, even after promising Sansa her father's safety and exile to the Night's Watch. If that wasn't enough, he even forced her to look at Ned's head mounted on a spike.
Look at him!
How long do I have to look?
As long as it pleases me.
Over the next few seasons, King Joffrey's cruelty became unbearable. He constantly humiliated and abused Sansa, including the time when he ordered Sir Meryn Trant to hit her in front of everyone. By season 3, Joffrey had become obsessed with his crossbow, using it to threaten people for sport. He even used Ross as a living target, shooting her multiple times just for his own amusement. Joffrey wasn't a complex villain like Cersei or Ramsay. He was pure evil and spite, wearing a golden crown. And his performance was so convincing that the actor behind Joffrey actually received death threats in real life. Joffrey finally found his match at his own wedding to Margaery Tyrell. After the wedding ceremony, the king was having a royal feast in the courtyard, and halfway through it, Joffrey revealed a mock play performed by dwarves, reenacting the War of the Five Kings. His plan was to mock Tyrion and make fun of the Stark's death at the same time, all while the audience laughed nervously. Tyrion, understandably, did not find any of it funny.
Lords, my ladies, I give you King Joffrey, the War of the Five Kings!
Joffrey kept pushing Tyrion, taunting him in front of the entire crowd before ordering him to pour wine for his king. Tyrion quietly gave Joffrey a goblet filled with wine.
Hurry up, this pie is dry.
After Joffrey took a sip, he began coughing violently and dropped his cup. Clutching his throat, he stumbled to the ground while his wedding guests watched in horror. His face turned red, then purple, and in his last moments, he pointed toward Tyrion, accusing him of the crime. Cersei, who had just watched her son die in her arms, screamed at the guards to arrest Tyrion.
You did this. He poisoned my son. Your king. Take him. Take him! Take him!
Joffrey's death felt long overdue. Ramsay Bolton. Ramsay appeared as Theon's savior after the sack of Winterfell, even helping his escape from Dreadfort. That was only so he could send people to catch him and bring him right back. After playing cruel mind games with Theon, Ramsay finally revealed his true identity in the torture chamber, beginning the worst days of Theon's life.
You forgot to ask one question. You forgot to ask if I'm a liar.
Ramsay cut off Theon's genitals, beat him up, and treated him like an animal until he stopped thinking on his own altogether. At the same time, we also saw Ramsay hunting women in the woods just for fun. He'd pretend to give them a chance to escape, and then shoot them down with arrows as they tried to run away. Then there was poor Sansa, who was forced to marry the monster and put up with his continuous torture. Ramsay would force himself on her every night and make Theon watch.
Take off your clothes. Oh, no. You stay here, Reek. You watch.
Luckily, they both got a chance to escape when Ramsay left the castle to torch Stannis' camps. Ramsay was obviously not happy when he returned, and his father only added to his misery by saying he'd choose his son with Walder as heir to the north if he didn't manage to find Sansa. So, he did what could be expected of a man like Ramsay. He stabbed his father and locked Walder and her newborn child with his starving dogs, watching them being ripped apart piece by piece. But his sadistic reign finally came to an end with the iconic Battle of the Bastards, when Jon Snow and Sansa Stark marched their forces against him. He was defeated and almost beaten to death by Jon before being locked up. And then it was Sansa's turn.
Your words will disappear. Your house will disappear. Your name will disappear. All memory of you will disappear.
And as she said her piece, Ramsay's hounds began growling.
My hounds will never harm me.
You haven't fed them in 7 days, you said it yourself.
They're loyal beasts.
They were. Now they're starving.
But when the hounds started sniffing him, he knew it was going to be over soon.
Stop!
In a split second, the hound attacked Ramsay without mercy. He kept screaming until his mouth and throat were torn apart, along with the rest of his body. Gotta admit, both the Stark sisters knew how to take revenge. Walder Frey. Lord Walder Frey was the Lord of the Crossing, ruler of the twins, and the head of House Frey. But for all the high titles, he was a pathetic man, with no loyalties or honour. He first appeared in Game of Thrones when Catelyn Stark asked him for safe passage for Robb Stark's army across the twins during the War of the Five Kings. Walder agreed, but on the condition that Robb would marry one of his countless daughters. Catelyn and Robb agreed. It all went south when Robb fell for Talisa during the war. Their marriage infuriated Walder. Things looked like they had settled for good after he offered his daughter's hand to Edmure Tully as a peace gesture. When the Starks came to his home to attend the wedding, he betrayed them in the most horrifying way imaginable.
Your Grace, I feel I've been remiss in my duties. My king has married, and I owe my new queen a wedding gift.
He trapped Catelyn, Robb, Talisa, and the Stark bannermen in the Great Hall at the wedding ceremony and slaughtered them all, one by one.
The Lannisters send their regards.
Walder thought he'd killed all the Starks, until one night, after he was done feasting with Jaime Lannister, a serving girl brought him another piece of pie. The girl was too pretty to be one of his daughters, and Walder began lusting after her instantly. But his mood changed when he thought of both his sons, who were missing from the dinner party. And that's when the serving girl said,
Now.
But they're already here, my lord. Here, my lord.
And finally, Arya Stark reveals her identity.
The last thing you're ever going to see is a Stark smiling down at you as you die.
She pulled him back and slit his throat open, the same way her mother was killed. Arya stood in the Great Hall, watching Walder bleed to death, but her revenge wasn't complete. She used Walder's face to hold another feast in honor of all his sons.
Proper wine for proper heroes. Stand together.
After an inspiring speech, she offered everyone, except the women, a toast of wine. As Walder's sons drank, Arya talked about the horrors of the Red Wedding, watching them cough up blood from the poison she had mixed in it.
Butcher the woman pregnant with her babe. Cut the throat of a mother of 5. Slaughtered your guests after inviting them into your home. You should have ripped them all out.
Arya ended the line of phrase, but her list wasn't complete. Peter Littlefinger Baelish. Lord Peter Baelish, also called Littlefinger, was a master of manipulation. In addition to being the master of the coin, he owned many brothels in King's Landing and a network of spies that rivaled even Varys. But he wasn't cruel like Joffrey or Ramsay. He didn't enjoy killing or torturing. His cruelty was more psychological in nature, where he would manipulate people's emotions, their weaknesses, and trust as his weapons. He would lie, set traps, and then stand back to watch the chaos unfold. It all began when Littlefinger manipulated Lysa Arryn into poisoning her husband, Jon Arryn, the Hand of the King. He then made her write a letter to her sister, Catelyn Stark, blaming the Lannisters for his death. He wanted to spark distrust between the two houses, so he could benefit from the chaos. When Ned Stark traveled to King's Landing to uncover the truth, Littlefinger pretended to be his ally, feeding him half-truths and secrets, while secretly playing both sides. When King Robert died, Littlefinger betrayed Ned, leaving him at Joffrey's mercy.
I did warn you not to trust me.
Keeping his intentions always a secret, he manipulated Sansa for years, constantly reminding her that she needed him while secretly using her to gain control of the North. He eventually helped Sansa escape from King's Landing and took her to the Vale, where he had married Lysa Arryn at last. But Sansa's presence bothered her, and when she saw her kissing Peter, she lost it completely. In a fit of rage, she threatened to throw Sansa out the moon door, but Littlefinger stepped in, pretending to calm her down.
Silly wife. I have only loved one woman. Only one my entire life. Your sister.
The Lords of the Vale demanded answers after Lysa's death, but Peter convinced them that she had been emotionally unstable and jealous, and her fragile state of mind drove her to suicide. He even had Sansa back up his story. After years of scheming, he finally pushed his luck too far by trying to pit Sansa and Arya against each other in Winterfell. His lies backfired when Sansa called a meeting in the Great Hall, pretending to accuse Arya only to turn the tables on him.
You stand accused of murder. You stand accused of treason. How do you answer these charges, Lord Baelish?
Arya counted off all his crimes, starting from Ned Stark's betrayal, Lysa Arryn's murder, to his role in starting the War of the Five Kings. In a classic Littlefinger move, he tried to talk his way out of the situation. No one was buying it anymore.
You held a knife to his throat. You said, I did warn you not to trust me.
In that moment, Peter knew he wasn't getting out of this one alive. Before he could argue, Arya slit his throat with the same dagger he had once used to frame others. But while Peter manipulated everyone in secret, Tywin Lannister did his bidding openly without any shame or remorse. Tywin Lannister. Tywin Lannister was one of the most powerful, feared, and calculating figures in Game of Thrones. He's the true patriarch of House Lannister. Cold, brilliant, and utterly ruthless. Everything he did revolved around one goal: protecting his family's legacy and making sure he never lost his power or respect. But the irony of his life was that his family disappointed him constantly. Cersei for being born a woman.
I don't distrust you because you're a woman. I distrust you because you're not as smart as you think you are.
Jaime for giving up his right to Casterly Rock and joining the King's Guard.
For 40 years I've tried to teach you. If you haven't learned by now, you never will. Go. If serving as a glorified bodyguard is the sum of your ambition, go serve.
And Tyrion for killing his wife in childbirth. More importantly, for being a dwarf.
The day that you were born, I wanted to carry you into the sea and let the waves wash you away. Instead, I let you live. And I brought you up as my son, because you're a Lannister.
Although Joffrey sat on the throne, it was Tywin who actually ruled the realm from behind the scenes, planning, manipulating, and forcing others to obey his commands.
A man who must say, I am the king, is no true king.
My father won the real war. He took the crown.
The king is tired. See him to his chambers.
But of all the people he bullied, Tyrion was his least favorite. He mocked him constantly for being the imperfect Lannister, but pushed it too far when he forced him to marry Sansa. He didn't care about Tyrion's feelings or Sansa's trauma. Tywin simply wanted to strengthen the Lannisters' control of the North.
We need to act first and kill this union in its crib.
And how do we do that?
We find Sansa Stark a different husband.
Wonderful.
Yes, it is.
Tywin also threatened to get Shae, his lover, killed if Tyrion didn't leave her. So, in a desperate attempt to keep Shae safe, Tyrion insulted her enough to break her heart, hoping she would leave on her own. But here's the twist. Even though Tywin forced Tyrion to send Shae away, he didn't let her leave, and instead turned her into his personal whore. And then came the Purple Wedding, after which Tywin staged a whole trial, framing Tyrion as Joffrey's murderer, even though he knew his son was innocent.
I'm guilty of a far more monstrous crime. I'm guilty of being a dwarf.
If Jaime hadn't set Tyrion free at the last moment, he would have been executed because of Tywin. Before he left King's Landing, he wanted to confront his father one last time. So he went to his bedchamber, but found Shae in his bedroom instead.
Tywin.
That very moment, something snapped inside him. Tyrion strangled Shae and grabbed a crossbow to go after Tywin. His father was sitting on the toilet. Even as Tyrion pointed the crossbow at him, he remained calm and talked to him as if he was still in complete control.
Put down the crossbow.
Tywin tried to manipulate the situation, as always, and made a mistake by calling Shae a whore. Tyrion finally pulled the trigger without a second thought.
You afraid of a dead whore? You shot me.
You're no son of mine. I am your son. I have always been your son.
Tywin still thought he was in control. He kept trying to change Tyrion's mind to let him live. But then Tyrion shot a second bolt, and this one killed him instantly. The mighty Lord Tywin Lannister, who ruled with pride and cruelty, died in humiliation on the toilet, murdered by his own son. If you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing so I can also stop making videos from my toy. And just like Tywin, Alliser Thorne was also too proud to see how wrong he was, and that cost him his life. Alliser Thorne. Alliser Thorne was a knight from House Thorne who fought for House Targaryen during Robert's rebellion. But when the rebellion failed, he was sent to the Wall. When Jon Snow arrived at Castle Black, Alliser became his instructor in swordsmanship, but even as a teacher, he couldn't hide his hatred for Jon's noble birth and arrogance.
He yielded. Looks like the bastard's in love.
He constantly bullied and humiliated Jon, thinking he was better than him. So when he became Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Thorne was filled with bitterness and anger. What bothered him the most was Jon's alliance with the Wildlings. To him, the Night's Watch's purpose was to kill Wildlings, not to make friends with them. This difference of opinion pushed him towards mutiny. He lied to the Brothers of the Watch, claiming that Jon had betrayed them all. Then he lured Jon outside just so all of them could stab him, one by one.
For the Watch.
But who knew that Jon Snow would come back from the dead, thanks to Melisandre and a little dark magic? When he returned to Castle Black, everyone was shocked. Alliser, alongside the others who had stabbed Jon, were captured and thrown into cells, and later brought outside for execution, as the entire Night's Watch watched silently. Alliser showed no regrets for his actions.
I had a choice, Lord Commander. Betray you, or betray the Night's Watch. If I had to do it all over, knowing where I'd end up, I pray I'd make the right choice again.
Jon cut the rope himself, and the platform dropped. Alliser died because he was too prejudiced and foolish to understand Jon's vision to save the Seven Kingdoms. Just like Viserys Targaryen was too stupid to think he could command the Dothraki. Viserys Targaryen. Viserys Targaryen was one of the most delusional characters in Game of Thrones. After Robert claimed King's Landing, Viserys' mother died giving birth to Daenerys during their escape. The two children were then smuggled across the Narrow Sea, where Viserys spent his entire youth moving from city to city, begging for shelter and living off his family name. He was convinced the Iron Throat was his birthright, and his obsession drove him to trade his own sister to Khal Drogo, the Dothraki warlord, for 40,000 warriors.
I'll stay with Drogo until he fulfills his end of the bargain and I have my crown.
But it wasn't Viserys' ambition that made him one of the most hated characters on the show. It was the sheer cruelty and disgust with which he treated Daenerys. He would constantly abuse her, both verbally and physically, calling her a stupid little bitch whenever she did something he didn't like.
I would let his whole tribe fuck you. All 40,000 men and their horses too, if that's what it took.
He believed he was the last true heir, but when Daenerys became stronger with Khal Drogo's support, he felt like he was losing control. He became desperate and jealous, thinking that the people who once obeyed him now treated Daenerys as the true royal. One night, in Vaes Dothrak, he barged into the sacred hall during a feast, drunk and carrying a sword. He was angry with Drogo, who had still not given him his army. In an act of sheer madness, he pointed the blade at Daenerys' belly, threatening to cut her unborn child if the Khal didn't fulfill his promise.
They can't shed blood in their sacred city.
But I can. I want what I came for.
Viserys had crossed his limits.
What's he saying?
He says yes. You shall have a golden crown that men shall tremble to behold.
At first he thought Drogo was honoring him, but he soon realized his intentions were deadly. Before he could do anything, Drogo's men grabbed him and forced him to his knees as Drogo took off his golden belt and melted it in a pot over the fire until it was burning hot.
Look away, Khaleesi.
No.
Danny, tell them. Make them. No, you can't. Danny, please!
Crown for king.
Daenerys did not interrupt Drogo, but watched her brother get what he deserved for treating her like his slave, just as he lifted the pot and poured the molten gold over Viserys' head. He screamed as the liquid metal burned through his skull, then fell silent as the gold hardened into a solid crown, draining the life out of him. His death proved
He was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon.
challenging Khal Drogo was definitely a really dumb move. What Shae did was worse than anything we have mentioned above. Shae was a prostitute who was brought to Tyrion's camp during the War of the Five Kings. She was sharp, confident, and witty, very different from the timid women Tyrion was used to. Shae talked back to Tyrion, mocking and flirting with him, and seemed genuinely amused by his intelligence. This was completely new for Tyrion, since he was used to being ridiculed or pitied. She didn't see Tyrion just as a drunken imp, but someone who was smart and kind. So it only made sense that he fell in love with her and smuggled her into King's Landing as Sansa's handmaid. Shae loved Tyrion, but hated being kept a secret. She wanted to be with Tyrion, but he knew that if Tywin ever found out about them, he'd kill her.
You think I want children who can never see their father, who would be killed in their sleep if their grandfather found out about them?
Everything was fine until Tyrion was forced to marry Sansa. That broke Shae's heart, even though Tyrion tried to explain his reasons to her.
We'll fight them together, it's like you said. I am yours and you're mine.
But Tyrion knew that was impossible, said some terrible things to Shae, so she'd go away for her own safety. And she did. Or so Tyrion thought.
You're a whore! Sansa is fit to bear my children, and you are not. I can't be in love with a whore. I can't have children with a whore. How many men have you been with? 500, 5,000?
During his trial for Joffrey's death, Shae reappeared and testified against Tyrion, claiming that he and Sansa had planned Joffrey's murder together. She even mocked Tyrion's love for her and called him a monster. Her words cut deep, but Tyrion still didn't harm her in any way. However, when he found Shae in Tywin's bed on the night Jaime set him free, he couldn't bear the betrayal. When Shae saw Tyrion, she immediately grabbed a dagger to defend herself, but Tyrion grabbed her golden chain from her neck, pulled it hard until she stopped moving. Tyrion was left heartbroken, couldn't believe what he'd done.
I'm sorry.
But while these guys definitely had it coming, Game of Thrones also took out plenty of people who were just collateral damage. Let's take a look at the characters in Game of Thrones who didn't deserve their fate. Ned Stark. Ned Stark was the Lord of Winterfell, known for his unwavering honor, sense of justice, and loyalty to family and kingdom. When King Robert visited the North, he requested Ned to come to King's Landing as Hand of the King, since he needed someone he could trust by his side. Also, the last hand dying mysteriously, Robert suspected danger rising in the capital, and wanted his old friend by his side.
You helped me win the Iron Throne, now help me keep the damn thing.
When Ned arrived in King's Landing, he discovered that the previous hand had been investigating the royal children before he died, provoking Ned to begin his own research by studying the Book of Family Histories and visiting Robert's bastards. And it wasn't long before he discovered the truth about King Robert's children, namely that all of them were bastards, between Cersei and Jaime, no less.
You love your children.
With all my heart.
No more than I love mine.
And they're all Jaime's.
Thank the gods.
Torn between loyalty to the crown and his moral compass, Ned attempted to expose the secret and protect the realm. But before he could talk to Robert, he passed away during a boar hunt, leaving him in a difficult position, where he had to place his trust in Peter Baelish, one of the most deceptive men in King's Landing. Unfortunately, and predictably, Baelish showed his true colors and betrayed Ned at the last minute, leaving him to Cersei and Joffrey's mercy.
I did warn you not to trust me.
Locked in the dungeon, Ned was given the impossible choice to either die in honor or confess to betraying the king and spend his remaining days in the Night's Watch. Realizing both Sansa and Arya were in danger being in King's Landing, Ned ignored all his honor and chose the wall instead to protect his children. When the day finally came, Ned was taken to the Great Sept of Baelor as a prisoner, and he confessed to treason, speaking words that he never meant but said only to protect his daughters.
I come before you to confess my treason.
For a moment, felt like Ned would be spared just as Varys promised, but Joffrey's sudden change of heart changed everything. Instead of showing mercy and staying true to his word, he ordered Ned's execution. Cersei understood the implications and tried to stop Joffrey, but the cruel young king wanted to make an example of Ned. While Sansa screamed for his life and Arya pushed through the crowd to reach him, Joffrey's command to Sir Ilyn shattered the tension in an instant.
Sir Ilyn! Bring me his head!
And with one heart-stopping order, Ned was executed while both of his daughters watched in pain. Ned's death sent his daughters' lives spiraling into endless chaos and danger. Sansa was forced to stay in King's Landing, tortured and ridiculed, while Arya was forced to run, marking the beginning of a brutal journey of survival and revenge. But what if Ned never confronted Cersei and instead quietly gathered allies within King's Landing, including Varys and Stannis Baratheon? Had he kept his position as Hand after Robert's death, he could have slowly weakened the Lannisters' grip on power and eventually helped Stannis claim the throne. Ned could have survived through diplomacy, with him alive and all his children might have remained safe, and the Starks could have been saved from years of suffering and chaos. Catelyn, Robb, and Lysa Stark. After Ned Stark's execution at King's Landing, Robb became the new Lord of the North.
From this time to the end of time, we are a free and independent kingdom.
The King in the North.
Robb joined the War of the Five Kings to avenge his father, but he needed to cross the Twins, which were controlled by Walder Frey, to reach King's Landing. However, Walder made Robb promise to marry his daughter in return for safe passage. Robb agreed at that time, but later met Lysa on the battlefield, and both of them fell in love. Their marriage infuriated Walder, and he withdrew his support for Robb. But when the Starks' mission began to fail, Catelyn convinced Robb to make a peace offering to the Freys in the form of Edmure Tully's marriage proposal for his daughter. Walder accepted the proposal and invited the Starks to join the celebration. And in the beginning, everything seemed normal, until Catelyn saw Black Walder closing the door of the Great Wall. The next moment, Walder stopped the music and addressed Robb.
I feel I've been remiss in my duties. My king has married, and I owe my new queen a wedding gift.
And when Catelyn saw Roose Bolton's armor, all hell broke loose. Walder signaled his men to start killing the Starks, just as Lothar Frey stabbed Lysa from behind. He attacked her repeatedly, killing both Lysa and her unborn child. Robb was also badly injured, left in shock at Lysa's murder. Catelyn was desperate to save her son and grabbed one of Walder's wives, putting a knife to her throat. Robb knew that Lord Frey wouldn't stop now, so he called out to Catelyn just as Roose stepped in and said,
"The Lannisters send their regards."
Catelyn had tried to stop Walder, but he didn't even care about his wife. But with Robb dead, Catelyn didn't think before slitting the girl's throat. And only moments later, one of Walder's men slit hers. The Red Wedding left the North leaderless and vulnerable, allowing the House Bolton to take over as Warden of the North, and with Robb gone, the Lannisters secured total control of the Seven Kingdoms. The Freys also enjoyed temporary power until he was assassinated by Arya Stark. But what if Walder didn't break the sacred guest right tradition? If Robb stayed alive, the Starks would have become more powerful, and with Catelyn acting as the house's political mind, more houses would likely join their alliance. Robb could eventually defeat the Lannisters and even place the rightful Baratheon on the throne. Oberyn Martell. Oberyn Martell, also known as the Red Viper, was a Prince of Dorne who came to King's Landing to avenge his sister Elia, who was assaulted and killed by Gregor Clegane. So, when Tyrion demanded a trial by combat during Joffrey's murder trial, Oberyn saw it as the perfect opportunity to get his revenge on Gregor.
I want to bring those who have wronged me to justice. I will be your champion.
When the fighting finally started, Oberyn clearly had the upper hand. He was fast and precise, living up to his name of the Red Viper, meeting the Mountain blow for blow, hell, exceeding him. But while he wanted to finish the man who killed his sister, he also wanted his confession.
Say it. Say her name. Elia Martell. You raped her. You killed her children.
But Gregor refused to admit the truth. Then in one swift moment, Oberyn cut his leg and drove his spear through his chest, sending the Mountain crashing to the ground. Instead of finishing him then and there, Oberyn kept demanding a confession while pointing at Tywin, asking him to reveal the person who ordered the murder.
Who gave you the order?
Oberyn's single-minded desire for that revenge, for justice for his sister, turned out to be a mistake. Leaving the Mountain alive, hunting for that confession, caused him to become a little less careful than he should have been. And when Oberyn got close enough, the Mountain pounced, tripping Oberyn over, and in a single moment, the fight changed completely. Gregor pinned Oberyn to the ground and crushed his head with his hands while confessing.
Elia Martell! I killed her children! That I raped her!
Oberyn's partner, Ellaria Sand, screamed, unable to believe what she had just witnessed, while Cersei smiled at the thought of both her enemies, Oberyn and Tyrion, meeting their ends. Oberyn's death almost sent Tyrion to his own death, and triggered a chain of events that eventually wiped out House Martell. But what if Oberyn killed the Mountain instead? Tyrion would walk free and perhaps never end up on this run or join Daenerys. The fight with the Mountain could push Oberyn into open conflict with the Lannisters. Driven by vengeance, Oberyn could then join Daenerys himself, offering her a powerful southern alliance and a massive Dornish army. Ygritte. Ygritte was a wildling who first crossed paths with Jon Snow during a Night's Watch mission beyond the Wall.
What's your name?
Ygritte.
Jon captured her, but when Qohorin Halfhand ordered him to kill her, he hesitated, a mistake that changed everything. Ygritte escaped, and as Jon chased after her, he became separated from his brothers and walked straight into a wildling ambush. What began as imprisonment soon turned into an undercover mission to infiltrate the Free Folk. But along the way, Jon and Ygritte fell genuinely, deeply in love.
How old are you, boy?
I'm a man of the Night's Watch.
You're a boy who's never been with a girl.
Ygritte showed him a world Jon didn't even know existed. Their most intimate moment in the cave behind the waterfall was when Jon finally broke his vows and slept with Ygritte. For a short time, the war, the wall, and his past didn't matter. Their on-screen romance was so exciting that both characters fell in love in real life, eventually getting married in 2018. But in the show, Jon eventually returned to the Night's Watch, leaving Ygritte heartbroken and furious. So when Mance Rayder marched south to attack the wall, she joined the assault, driven by hurt and betrayal. During the battle, Ygritte was swift and deadly. She shot down several brothers of the Night's Watch with her bow, but when she finally spotted Jon, she paused despite her anger. The two lovers locked eyes, and in the next moment, an arrow struck Ygritte through her heart. Jon was frozen in place, unable to understand where the arrow came from, and then he turned to see Ollie holding the bow. The young boy thought he had saved Jon from Ygritte's attack, not knowing that he had just killed the woman he loved. Jon rushed towards Ygritte just as she fell to the ground.
Do you remember that cave? I should have stayed in that cave. You know nothing, Jon Snow.
And Ygritte's story ended just like that. Ygritte's death changed Jon and made him even more determined to save the Free Folk from the White Walkers. But what if Ygritte survived the attack? If she lived, Ygritte would follow Jon after he became king in the north. The Northerners would distrust her initially, but she would win them over with her bravery and loyalty. She could help Jon unite both Northerners and Wildlings, creating a stronger front against the White Walkers in the Battle of Winterfell. Though I wonder how things would have worked out with Daenerys. Perhaps a topic for another video. Shireen Baratheon. Shireen was Stannis Baratheon's only child, and even though she suffered a lot in her childhood because of grayscale, she was a kind girl who loved her family dearly. And even though Stannis was especially close to the little girl, his ambition to become king came before everything and anything else. After Robert's death, Stannis believed he was the true heir of Westeros, so he marched towards King's Landing and even killed his own brother Renly with the help of the Red Priestess to ensure he was the one who sat on the throne. However, Stannis ended up losing most of his ships and soldiers at the Battle of the Blackwater, when House Lannister and Tyrell joined the enemy forces. After his defeat, Stannis went to the wall to gather more men for his cause because Melisandre believed he was the only one who could defeat the White Walkers. He reached Castle Black just in time to save the Night's Watch from Mance Rayder's attack. His forces crushed the Wildlings, and Stannis offered them a choice to bend the knee or die. Thousands joined him as he marched to take Winterfell from the Boltons, another strategy to rally support for his claim.
No matter. I shall take back the North from the thieves who stole it. Tywin Lannister is dead, he can't protect them now. I shall mount Roose Bolton's head on a spike.
But the weather turned brutal, trapping Stannis' forces deep in snowdrifts for days. His horses began dying, supplies ran out, and the men were losing faith in his cause. That's when Melisandre reminded him that the fire god needed another sacrifice, hinting at his only daughter, Shireen. Stannis hated the idea, but he was desperate. So he went to Shireen and explained how he must fulfill his destiny. The innocent girl, who had no idea what his father had planned with the Red Priestess, said,
It doesn't matter. I want to help you.
But when Melisandre dragged her out of her tent and forcefully tied her to the pyre, as Stannis' men watched in horror, she suddenly realized the consequences of her promise. She screamed for her father in the vain hopes that he would come and save her. But when he finally appeared, he simply stood there, silent and unmoving.
It's what the Lord wants. It's a good thing. A great thing.
Even though Shireen's mother never loved her, when she called out to her in desperation, her mother rushed towards her, trying to save her little girl. But she was too late, as Melisandre lit the pyre, just as Stannis' men grabbed Selyse, stopping her from helping her daughter. Shireen's painful, pitiful screams echoed in the frozen night, while her parents watched the flames burn their only heir. Stannis thought Shireen's sacrifice would make him king, but her death affected his cause in ways he had never expected, starting from his men who abandoned him overnight, disgusted by what he had done. Shireen's mother, Selyse, hanged herself the next morning after realizing what she had allowed. And even though Stannis marched on Winterfell, despite these setbacks, Ramsay quickly won, killing what remained of his army. As for Stannis, he was wounded and cornered when Brienne of Tarth found him and executed him for murdering Renly. But what if Stannis had refused to kill his daughter? What if Sir Davos had discovered Melisandre and Stannis' plan and secretly helped Shireen escape to Castle Black? The girl's kindness would become a breath of fresh air for the men of the Night's Watch, who would slowly grow to love and protect her as one of their own. And Stannis, realizing it was over, might have given up on his hopes to become a king and would eventually return to Castle Black. No longer a king, simply a father relieved to be reunited with his only heir. Myrcella Baratheon. Myrcella Baratheon was Robert and Cersei's eldest child, but we all know how she got her blonde hair. Side note, kind of crazy how big a theme incest is in Game of Thrones in general. Wild. Myrcella herself, though, was a kind and gentle girl, very different from the rest of her family. When Tyrion became Hand of the King, he advised using Myrcella to forge a political alliance with Dorne. Her wedding to Tristan Martell, the son of Prince Oberyn Martell, would not only give the Lannisters a powerful ally, but also keep the girls safe from the capital, which was threatened at the time by Stannis Baratheon and Robb Stark. But things took a turn for the darker when Oberyn Martell, who had come to Joffrey's wedding as Dorne's representative, volunteered to become Tyrion's champion during the trial for Joffrey's murder. His crushing defeat at the hands of Gregor Clegane infuriated Oberyn's distraught lover, Ellaria, and their daughters, known as the Sand Snakes. They demanded that Doran Martell declare war against the Iron Throne, but he refused.
But we do not mutilate little girls for vengeance.
So, Ellaria hatched a plot that would make the Lannisters declare war against Dorne instead. When Jaime and Bronn came to Dorne to take Myrcella back to King's Landing, Doran let them go on the condition that his son Tristan would go with them. But just as the party was about to leave, Ellaria stepped up to Myrcella and did something completely unexpected.
Forgive me, child. I wish you all the happiness in the world.
What everyone saw as a gesture of love was actually Ellaria's final act of vengeance. She had kissed the girl with poison lipstick, and while she took the antidote just in time, Myrcella wasn't so lucky. When their journey began, Jaime tried to tell Myrcella that she was his daughter, but she surprised him by saying,
I know. About you and Mother, I think a part of me always knew. And I'm glad.
In that tender moment, Myrcella hugged Jaime, leaving him speechless. It was the first time Jaime openly embraced any of his children as his own. It could have started a new chapter for both of their lives, but just as she pulled back to smile at her father, her nose began to bleed, and she collapsed on the floor.
Myrcella? Myrcella?
Ellaria's poison claimed the poor girl's life, as Jaime had just opened up to one of his children. But what if Ellaria didn't poison Myrcella? Myrcella's return to King's Landing would make Cersei, who was already imprisoned by the Faith of the Seven, incredibly happy. Maybe she wouldn't break the way she did after the Walk of Atonement. Without the grief that pushed her over the edge, she might never have spiraled into the madness that destroyed the Sept of Baelor. Tommen Baratheon. Tommen Lannister. Baratheon was Cersei and Jaime Lannister's youngest son, who became king after Joffrey's death. That whole family, man. Tommen was young and innocent, qualities that turned him into a pawn for stronger forces like his own mother and Margaery Tyrell. From the moment Joffrey died, even Tywin began grooming Tommen into a king he could control, while Margaery manipulated him without him even realizing. But Cersei knew exactly what Margaery was trying to do, so after Tywin's death, she restored the Faith militant to counter the Tyrells' growing influence, giving the High Sparrow's religious movement more power than they had ever had before. She even had Margaery's brother, Sir Loras Tyrell, arrested for being gay. Later, at Loras's tribunal, Oliver, the spy working for Peter Baelish, who pretended to be Loras' squire and lover, testified that Loras was guilty of homosexuality, and, on top of all that Margaery knew about it but lied to protect him. His testimony got both Loras and Margaery arrested by the Faith militant, turning Tommen's world upside down.
Bearing false witness before the gods is as grave a sin as any, my lady. Take her.
No! Tommen! Tommen!
Tommen was angry and frustrated that the High Sparrow held so much power over the king and queen, and he sank into a deep depression when the Faith arrested Cersei. But things changed when Margaery convinced him to embrace the Faith of the Seven, an act that spared her from the Walk of Atonement.
Together, we announce a new age of harmony, a holy alliance between the Crown and the Faith.
But Cersei was furious that Tommen sided with the Faith, and on the day of Margaery's trial, Sir Gregor forced him to stay in the chamber on Cersei's command. And as he stood at his window, he suddenly saw the great sept blow up, killing everyone inside, including his wife, Margaery. He kept staring at the burning sept for some time, but he never screamed or cried. Instead, he remained silent at the death of his wife, the loss of his newfound faith, and the knowledge that his own mother was responsible for all of it. He realized that he had nothing to live for anymore, calmly took off his crown, and, without any hesitation, stepped out of his bedroom window to his death. With Tommen gone, Cersei lost her last child and the only legitimate Baratheon heir on the throne. The lack of a clear successor gave Cersei unrestrained power, but also heightened tensions across Westeros over what would happen next.
I now proclaim Cersei of the House Lannister, first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men.
But what if Tommen didn't jump out of the window? Instead of just feeling helpless after Margaery's death, Tommen could have been enraged by Cersei's actions. If Tommen decided to take revenge, to get justice, he would pretend to be a grieving, obedient son. But behind the scenes, he would gather loyalists who despised Cersei, and let's be real, there were quite a few people who did just that. And when the time was right, he would order the Kingsguard to arrest her for crimes against the crown and faith. Taking away Cersei's power would be the perfect revenge for Tommen, who was used to being a pawn from the very beginning. Missandei. Missandei was from the island of Narth, but when she was only a child, slavers captured her and her brothers and sold them in the city of Astapor. When Daenerys Targaryen came to Astapor to buy the army of Unsullied, Missandei was there translating the deal to the slave master, and that's how the two of them met. When Dany's dragon killed the master and the Unsullied took control of the city under her command, Missandei joined Dany's cause, quickly turning into one of her most trusted advisors and friends. After Dany defeated the Night King at Winterfell, they sailed together towards King's Landing. However, their ships were attacked by Euron Greyjoy near Dragonstone. One of the great scorpions struck Dany's dragon, Rhaegal, a loss that forced Dany to fly away with her only remaining dragon, Drogon. With no one to protect Missandei and Dany's armies from Greyjoy's attack, the men suffered heavy losses as their fleet was blown to pieces. Countless soldiers drowned at sea, and those who managed to reach the shore were in a terrible state. As soon as Grey Worm washed ashore, he began searching desperately for Missandei, and that's when the truth dawned on him that Missandei had been captured. Dany gathered her forces and marched towards King's Landing, with Tyrion and Grey Worm by her side.
Queen Daenerys demands Cersei's unconditional surrender and the immediate release of Missandei of Narth.
Tyrion stepped forward first, trying to negotiate Missandei's release. He almost begged Cersei to think about her unborn child and surrender peacefully while she still could, but Cersei didn't care. Cruel and implacable, she turned towards Missandei and coldly ordered her to say her last words. Dany, who had already suffered too many losses, helplessly watched her closest friend in the enemy's hands. Missandei looked at Grey Worm, the man she loved, and then at Dany, the queen who set her free. And then she spoke her final words.
Dracarys!
The Mountain stepped forward and beheaded Missandei in one quick, violent strike. Missandei's execution crushed Grey Worm, who quickly looked away. But her death struck Dany differently. Now alone in a world ruled by deception, Dany realized that violence was the only way she could rule. But what if Cersei let Missandei go at Dany's request? Cersei's single act of diplomacy or mercy could have shifted everything dramatically. Tyrion would have used the moment to push her harder for a peaceful surrender, and with Missandei alive, Dany might actually listen. Missandei's release could have stopped Dany from spiraling into the fury and madness that eventually burned King's Landing, and Cersei along with it. Ser Jorah Mormont. Ser Jorah Mormont was originally sent to spy on Daenerys for King Robert, hoping to earn a royal pardon for his crimes. Even after Robert's death, he secretly kept working for Varys, but the longer he stayed by Daenerys' side, the more he admired her strength, compassion, and vision.
Blood of my blood.
Eventually, he stopped feeding Varys information, but when Daenerys found out about his betrayal, she banished him from her service. By then, Ser Jorah had fallen in love with Dany and was willing to do anything to earn her forgiveness, from risking his life to capture Tyrion to saving her in the fighting pits of Meereen and enduring another exile after contracting grayscale.
Well, I command you to find the cure, wherever it is in this world. I command you to heal yourself and then return to me.
When Jorah returned, Dany valued his loyalty and his pledge to stay by her side to the very end. That promise came true at the Battle of Winterfell. Daenerys was riding Drogon, burning whites from a safe distance, but when the Night King raised the dead inside Winterfell's walls, swarms of whites leapt onto Drogon, clawing and stabbing at him. The dragon became overwhelmed and shook everyone off, including Daenerys, and flew away from the terrifying scene, leaving Daenerys stranded on the ground, weaponless and exposed. She wasn't alone for long. Jorah placed himself between her and thousands of whites and kept fighting, refusing to back down. Daenerys, who had never fought in close combat before, tried to defend herself clumsily with a small blade and kept reaching out to Jorah to make sure he was okay. But Daenerys could sense Jorah's time was running out. At the very moment Arya killed the Night King, ending the battle, Jorah collapsed to the ground. Daenerys dropped to her knees beside him, pulling Jorah into her arms as she cried over her fallen knight. In those final moments, Jorah died in the arms of the woman he loved. Jorah had been Dany's constant anchor, someone who'd supported her when she doubted herself, always reminded her to choose compassion over war. Jorah's loss was a shattering blow for Dany and pushed her into emotional isolation, eventually taking her down a darker path in King's Landing. But what if Ser Jorah survived the Whites that night? His strategic mind and combat skills could have helped protect Missandei from being captured, and even if he had failed, just like Grey Worm, Jorah might have tempered Daenerys' anger after Missandei's death, perhaps even preventing the attack on King's Landing altogether. Maester Luwin. Maester Luwin was the resident Maester of Winterfell, serving House Stark for many years. He was deeply trusted by Eddard and Catelyn Stark and helped raise the Stark children with wisdom and good manners. When Catelyn and Robb marched south to free his father, Luwin took care of Bran and Rickon in their absence. But when Theon Greyjoy seized the castle with the Ironborn, the children's world was turned upside down. Despite Theon's betrayal, Maester Luwin continued to counsel him, trying to steer him in the right direction. Even when Ramsay Bolton's forces surrounded the castle, Luwin advised him to run away to save himself.
What's your counsel, trusted friend?
Run.
Theon didn't run away, and instead tried to prepare his forces for the Boltons' attack. However, while he was still in the middle of his speech, one of his own men hit him on the head, knocking him out. Maester Luwin immediately came to Theon's rescue, but Dagmar Cleftjaw stabbed him at the same time, wounding him.
What is this? What are you doing?
But even after being mortally wounded, Maester Luwin helped Bran and Rickon escape with Hodor and Osha, away from the Boltons' cruelty.
They may come back. You have to go. Put on your warmest clothes. Pack as much food as you can carry and go north.
But just before Osha led the kids away, Maester Luwin quietly requested her to end his suffering.
Do it quickly.
But what if Dagmar never stabbed Maester Luwin, and he travelled north with Bran and Rickon? With his guidance, Rickon would never be sent to the last hearth alone, only to be betrayed by the Umbers. The Boltons would not be able to use Rickon as bait when Jon Snow marched on Winterfell. And in that version of events, the youngest Stark just might have survived. Who else do you think deserves to be on this list? Let us know in the comments below, and check out our video on every person who truly did deserve to die in Game of Thrones to get the other side of the coin. I promise you, it's some wonderful popcorn viewing and worthy of a watch. Until next time, see you around.